Usually people think the more information, the better. Yet sometimes we do this. So this is more or less the phenomenon I want to talk about today, deliberate ignorance. It's a little bit of a counterintuitive phenomenon, as we humans tend to pursue knowledge and we value information. And according to classic information-seeking theories, information is always valuable. Something not useful now might still be informative in the future. Also, if that information is not that much of an interest, it can always be disregarded. And also, evolutionary theories sustain that information leads to better choices, and curiosity motivates learning. But sometimes, wait a second. Yeah, I don't know why it's not, no. My computer is just being slow for some reason.
Oh, we don't see the mouse. The mouse went off.
The mouse is here. It's on the right screen, but.
Okay, it's back here now. Can you try it? No. Can you try to open this?
But it's
the presentation.
Yeah.
Can you use this instead of the?
No. Yeah, I'm using that one. Yeah, so sometimes adults choose not to know certain things, and this for a variety of reasons. We conceptualize deliberate ignorance as Hertwig and Engel do, so it's the individual or collective choice not to seek or use information. And I think especially these cases where the information or the potential benefits of that information are high and the acquisition costs are low, that becomes especially interesting. As I've said, there are several reasons for one to choose to remain ignorant. Again, based on a taxonomy provided by Hertwig and Engel, we came up with a list of reasons that we also included in our research with children. So I will now briefly go over them. There is deliberate ignorance to create suspense and surprise, to regulate one's emotions, to ask responsibility or strategic ignorance, and to sustain impartiality and fairness. I will now give you some empirical examples for these different motivations. So I think the first one is quite intuitive, to create suspense, surprise. If you're reading a novel, you wouldn't like to find out about the plot before finishing it, so we may derive enjoyment from anticipating certain information. Sometimes we prefer not to know certain things to spare our feelings. I think an increasing tendency, which we speak often about nowadays, is this tendency to avoid the news, partially because it's considered too pessimistic. Sometimes ignorance provides us with an excuse to behave in a more selfish way. Several studies with economic gains have shown that people avoid information of the impact on others of their actions, and consequently also make more selfish choices. And sometimes we want to protect ourselves from our own biases or favoritism. There's this famous study by Golden and Rouse that shows that the use of blind auditions in symphony orchestras to hire people actually increased the number of women being hired. So these are all reasons in which, or cases in which adults choose to remain ignorant, but we have some reasons to believe that children might act in different ways in similar situations, because where adults tend to be more selective when seeking information, children tend to be more explorative, curious and impulsive, and as curiosity foments learning, this may also be very adaptive to this early life stage. Additionally, deliberate ignorance is quite of a cognitively demanding behavior. It may need some level of meta-ignorance, so the capacity to assess one's own state of ignorance in the first place. It may also require some inhibitory control, as one may have to inhibit the impulse to reveal an information that may be standing right in front of you, and you may have to stop to think about the potential consequences of revealing that information. So, for example, thinking that you may feel regret when you reveal that information. This is, of course, not an exhaustive list, but these are all cognitive abilities that undergo quite a lot of changes until late preschool age, and therefore, we thought they may be good predictors of deliberate ignorance. Now about research questions. So children are more impulsive or curious and they explore, but does this also mean that they want to know everything, or do they sometimes also choose to remain ignorant, just as adults do? This was our first research question. Does this preference not to know change with age? For what reasons or what motivations elicit children's preference not to know? And finally, does performance on measures of inhibitory control, meta-ignorance, and anticipated regret predict children's preference to remain ignorant? These were our research questions for this study. So what did we do? We conducted a vignette study with children in Leipzig in Germany, both in our university lab and in schools and kindergartens. There were 4 age groups. Children were between 5 and 8. And the main part of our study was a vignette study. So all children were presented 2 hypothetical scenarios. So there were 8 of them. And so we asked children to imagine that they were facing a certain situation. And each scenario would end with the question, would you like to know this information, or would you rather not know? These 8 scenarios were distributed over 4 motivations, the ones that I've already discussed with you. So to create suspense, surprise, regulate emotions, for strategic benefits, and to sustain impartiality and fairness. And an additional part of our study, and a bit more exploratory, were these cognitive test battery that all children also completed. For inhibitory control, children completed a Simon Says task. For meta-ignorance, a partial exposure task, and all children also completed an anticipated regret task. I don't have much time to go into the details of these tasks now, but feel free to ask me questions later. So, as it was quite a big part of our study, I will now guide you through one of the scenarios that children were facing so that you get a bit of an idea of how this actually looked like. This is Mia. Mia is your best friend, and today she's celebrating her birthday in a theme park. And you and all your friends are invited, and you're very excited to go. But unfortunately, you've fallen sick, and you cannot join. And you're actually very disappointed, since you were really excited to try out all the cool roller coasters. Now, your friends have made a video of how much fun they're having on one of the roller coasters. And your father has just received this video. You could have a look at it, if you like. And now the question would be, would you like to know how much fun your friends had without you, or would you rather not know? And we would also ask children, why is that? So this was an example, as you may have guessed, from the category emotion regulation. But I will give you also an example for the other categories. So to create suspense and surprise, one of the scenarios involved that children could find out about the end of a movie that they were about to see that same week. Another case for the emotion regulation scenarios was this one. Here children could find out whether others or older children in school had gossiped about them. For the strategic ignorance category, this was one of the scenarios. So here children had to make a choice between a fancy and a boring train set. And before making their choice, they had the chance to find out whether or not the fancy train set had been produced in an environmentally friendly manner or not. And then there was this one scenario for sustaining impartiality and fairness. Here children were the judges of a drawing contest, and before declaring the winner, they could find out what picture their friend had drawn or keep it as a kind of blind contest. So yeah, just to wrap it up, we had two main independent variables. So there was motivation for remaining ignorant and age, and we also thought that these three cognitive abilities would be potentially good predictors for deliberate ignorance. And we had this one main dependent variable, which was whether or not children wanted to know. And additionally, as you may have noticed, we also asked children why they wanted to know. We transcribed their answers, coded them with one or another coding scheme depending on whether they wanted to know or not. And mostly we were interested in seeing if children chose ignorance, whether they would also reference the motivations we had in mind when designing the scenarios. The results. So I think our first main question was, do children sometimes want to remain ignorant? And as you will see, yes, they did, and there were occurrences of them reporting this since age 5, but this tendency increased with age. Maybe also interesting is that about 30% of all the 5-year-olds wanted to know in all occasions, and 15% of the 6-year-olds, but none of the 7- and 8-year-olds. The first step in our main analysis was comparing a full with a null model. The full model was including an interaction between age and motivation, and we found a significant interaction effect, which we investigated by looking at each motivation separately. And as you will see, there were different things going on in each motivation. So these are the cases for suspense and surprise scenarios. Here, rates of ignorance were quite high, like about 2/3 of children wanted to remain ignorant here. And this tendency to remain ignorant increased with age. These are the emotion regulation scenarios. So here rates of ignorance were a bit lower. About 1/4 of children wanted to remain ignorant. But again, there was this age effect we could see. In the other two categories, overall rates of ignorance were lower and no age effects were found. So rates of ignorance were about 15% here. We looked at these justifications, and we were mostly interested in seeing whether children would also reference the same motivations that we also had in mind when designing the scenario. So for example, because if I do not know, then it would be a surprise, or because if I knew, I would feel sad. The arched part of the blue bars, or like the blue bars are the proportion of children that wanted to remain ignorant in the first place, and the arched part are the children that also additionally referenced the motivations that we had in mind. So as you can see in the surprise and emotion scenarios, that was more than half of the kids. The cognitive predictors, things, first, as a first say maybe, as one could expect, performance of children improved in all 3 tasks with age. And we decided to continue this part of the analysis only with the, not with the strategic and impartial scenarios, because rates of ignorance were quite low there and no age differences were found. What did we find here? First of all, age remained the most robust predictors. We ran a multi-model inference including age and the 3 cognitive abilities. But also meta-ignorance had a significant positive effect, although when looking at surprise and emotion scenarios separately, none of the cognitive predictors was found to have any effect, so I would take these results with some caution. Now, just to wrap it up, what are our conclusions here? So our first main question was, do children sometimes report the wish to remain ignorant? And as we saw, yes, they do, since the age of 5, although this tendency increases with age. The most important motivations for them to remain ignorant are definitely, first of all, to create suspense and surprise, followed by regulating their emotions. And again, here in both categories, this tendency increased with age. About the cognitive predictors, meta-ignorance, so the capacity to assess one's own stage of ignorance, could be a potential influential factor for deliberate ignorance, meaning that the better performance on this on meta-ignorance or like higher level of meta-ignorance would be related to choosing more to remain ignorant. But again, I think more research is definitely needed to find out about the underpinnings of deliberate ignorance. And right now we're conducting a study because these were, of course, this was a vignette study, and children were facing hypothetical situations, and we're very curious to see what they would do in an actual, like in an acted out situation, so when facing these possibilities. And we're currently running a study on the development of strategic ignorance. So here, children have the chance to find out about game partners' norm violation, and we're especially interested in these cases where they are actually benefited by this cheating of their game partner, or whether they prefer to remain ignorant. And we're also additionally running a study on the development of emotion regulation, so whether children avoid negative feelings such as regret, a negative social comparison, or envy by remaining ignorant. So yeah, this was my talk. Thank you so much for listening. I'm happy to hear your questions.
Yeah, we have time for questions.
Thank you very much for this very interesting talk. I've got just one question. Because of the peak with 7 years, do you know, or do you have an idea why especially the 7-year-old ones try to be ignorant? Well, they prefer this.
Did you mean the peak in the impartiality scenarios, or like overall you had this?
In the impartiality meanings.
Well, I think what happens also in the impartiality scenario is that you might have to consider that we just had one scenario there. I mean, we saw this category as a bit more narrow, and that's why children were only presented with one scenario here. So I think it can be a bit tricky when you look at this graph. It looks like there is this age difference, but it also just displays one scenario. So actually, rates are just much lower here, and therefore, no age effect was probably found. I think, I can speculate. Most children, because I partially ran this study, I think most children didn't really get this idea of I can use this ignorance to remain impartial and avoid favoring my friend. Like some kids did get this idea, but not many of them. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for the interesting talk. I just have a clarification question.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this binary question at the end, whether they want to know or not. And I was just wondering whether you kind of counterbalance the order of those two things, and whether there might be some pattern that emerges if you kind of give them the option of knowing first every single time.
Yes, that's a good question. I have to say, we always ask the question in the same way. And I think there's quite some variance in. So, I mean, the question was always asked in the same way across all the scenarios. And the order of the scenarios was randomized. So there were different versions with different orders. And I think probably we would have, maybe see something more consistent if this question would have affected our results, which it might have affected it, but I think still the results kind of stand in that way. So, yeah.
Okay. No, sorry, I don't have any kind of theory to back up my question.
No.
I was just curious, and I just wanted to clarify.
No, but I think it would be a
how
good
you
idea
implemented that.
I mean, it's a good point that it's a binary choice, and I think one parent also asked me this question like, oh, but you end with the would you rather not know, or would you rather not know, and it would be maybe good to balance this out somehow. I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the talk. If I understood correctly, so the main reason children decide to remain ignorant is to maintain surprise and suspense. And this feels at odd with the observation that children love to hear the same story again and again and again. So I'm wondering how you reconcile these two things.
So you mean, so they like to hear the same story again and again, and therefore sometimes when they could actually have a surprise, or like by hearing a new story, you mean?
And they love, if you ask them to choose a movie, they will pick a movie they've seen already, not a new movie.
I think also maybe in the surprise case, but again I would be speculating, but I think we also, we verbalize this a lot, like, oh no, you better don't look at this because then it's going to be a surprise about their birthday, for example. Like, you better not look at your present yet. Like, I think this might be one category where it's made a little more explicit already in early childhood, whereas the other categories are, I think they are not confronted as much with this in daily life. Like, adults are not prompting them with this. So I think this might be a little bit affected also by this.
All right, we have time for one quick question.
I also like to see the same movies, so. These data are very interesting, but I think that the most important factor, as Jean-Rémy was suggesting, is this fact of creating suspense. And the others are, if I understand well the score, it's not a massive effect. And my question was whether you have thought about how to actually, as it were, weight the importance that kids give to their state of not knowing. And this could be done if you just give them a comparison that is not just simply knowing or not knowing, but for example, something that would have worked with my kids. If you say, would you like to know what your friends did, or would you like that we spend half an hour doing homeworks? Now, I'm very sure that this would have changed and so the question is, to what extent this is somewhat an ephemeral phenomenon, or it's really something by which you build your own personality, let's put it that way.
I mean, if I get the question correctly, I think the question was asked really explicitly here, so that made it a little less natural, like not a situation you would face in your day-to-day life, and therefore I think these follow-up studies, where it's actually not that easy, but we're trying to get into these more kind of natural situations where they can choose to look something up, or they can choose to look away, and I think, yeah, this was just the first step to get an idea, like do they first of all report the wish to remain ignorant? This is something they can, and starting from what age? But I think, yeah, it would be interesting to look, yeah, play around with this for sure.
Thank you so much.